All right, there we go. Hey, everybody. This is Ryan Singer. Thanks for listening to what I believe is going to be a dual crossover episode, correct? So you're going to be listening to this interview on Me and Paranormal You, which is the podcast that obviously, if you clicked on that, you know that. And then you're also going to be listening, if I'm not mistaken, the greatest message, right?
It is, but it is the greatest message. But I have to say, I'm not as consistent as you are with getting that out there. Yes.
Well, let's introduce you to everybody who doesn't yet know you. Polly Wyram. I believe I'm getting your name correct,
Yeah.
right? Wyram.
Yep.
Um, this is going to be a fun chat because I think we're going to be bouncing all over the place potentially. But the originally this conversation came about um, through, I think we were messaging each other. It was either through Instagram or email, and about the show that is currently on Discovery Plus, Alaskan Killer Bigfoot. Um, Now, to be clear, Polly is a medium, an intuitive, a Reiki healer, an author, and a podcast host. You are not, quote unquote, a Bigfoot hunter or anything like that, right?
Absolutely not. I think they cut it out. I actually at one point had to say I am not an expert on Bigfoot. It's like
Oh,
so far out of.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I have a lot of friends who have been, you know, I guess involved in this world now for a handful of years. And whether it comes to, producers always want to try to pitch the next show, reality show that's like either chasing ghosts or looking for creatures. And all of the people who are really, genuine and approach it with thought, they all say like there's no such thing as an expert on
Mm,
like especially ghosts, or
yeah.
like what is the afterlife, or how can you be an expert on something that is like currently unexplainable, whether it's Bigfoot or something like that. And producer was like, no, no, we can't say that, we can't talk about how, we have to present you as an expert or people won't watch. I mean, I think that's their incorrect belief system that they operate by. They don't realize that they're wrong, um, because they've seen someone else sell it in a certain way that became popular. So they're like, we all have to copy this, and we can't deviate from this, from this formula, right? When it's just like, to me, it's kind of it's silly, and foolish, to think that you can't have someone on television saying they're not an expert. Oh my God, how could we dare air that? You know what I mean? So that makes sense to me when you say it.
Well, no, I'm really not. I mean, listen, I'm the first to like raise my hand and say there's a lot I don't, I don't know anything about it. And Bigfoot's one of them. But it's interesting that you brought this up because, when I was thinking about, okay, if I were introducing you, Ryan Singer, comedian, paranormal, I was going to say paranormal expert, but then I was like, no, it's really like an advocate. Like you're the advocate for this, for this expanded mind, for this understanding, that our universe is so much more than what we really, typically think of when we're driving down the road, right?
For sure, I think advocate is a much better word. I mean,
Yeah.
granted, I've probably spent more time than your average person when it comes to reading books and, doing investigations, etc., and being interested in that. But I also have a life as a comedian and, a writer and, acting, and so it's like I don't. It's not like I spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, consuming paranormal stuff. Um, and I think, like we said earlier about the whole, what's an expert, right? And so, I mean, it's all relative, I think, too. So, like someone who knows nothing about the paranormal, like if we were to sit and have a conversation, they might be like, "Oh my God, you're like an expert. You know so much." And then, then if I were to sit down with someone who eats, breathes, lives paranormal all day long for the last 40 years of their life, I'd be like, "Oh my God, you're an expert." You know what I mean? So, it's definitely a sliding scale, and I think advocate is a really great word. Uh,
Well, I also think it's important, and we're going a little bit off topic, but I do believe that just in any of this, whether it's spiritual, Bigfoot, whatever, that there's so much more than just, reading books, although I love the book you had in your last podcast, but just reading books and talking about the studies that have been done. There's something to be said about experiencing it, living it, and that's how you really do become, that's how you really move in or move with that energy, right? Is by experiencing it. Because you can read a million books, doesn't do it for, you're not really an expert.
Exactly. I mean, you could read a million books about how to build the perfect like bench out of wood, and the first time you go to craft a bench out of wood by scratch, you've got something you can't even sit on, right? Or use.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and I think having conversations with people and being a listener, it's funny to me that people have to go to like grad school to become good listeners now, right? I mean, that's
Right.
to have a degree in therapy. It's you have to go through advanced education just to be able to listen and understand what someone is really saying when they're telling you things. And we all suffer from the the listening deficit from time to time, and not being able to truly, because we've got our own ideas we're trying to get out there.
Mhm.
But when it comes to like listening to people share their stories and the effect that whatever phenomena had on them, I think that's gosh, and I can't believe I always forget this guy's name, but it was on a series, the search for big or on the search of UFOs. And one of the guests on the show said something. We need to be more focused on like the what effect has the UFO sighting had on the person, not what is the
Yeah.
UFO made of, who's flying the UFO, blah
Yes.
blah blah. And it's like what's the effect of this sighting on the person? And that was really profound to me. And by having conversations and listening, over the years, you do recognize certain themes, commonalities that start popping up in people's stories, which give you a better grasp on the phenomena itself. As much as we can, anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally love it because that's what it is. I mean, that's what ultimately all of this is, just an experience. I just have to say one thing before we start. If I'm going to interview somebody, I always kind of tune in and I'm like, okay, how do they move through life, or what's their greatest gift? And the thing that I was shown about you is that it's like you constantly nudge. So it's not like this push, not really pushy, but you constantly nudge the collective into this expanded awareness. So you really are one of those people that are here right now that are really helping expand the awareness, which I think is a beautiful thing. And I don't know that I've seen that before when I'm, tuning into people. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Oh well, I mean that's really flattering and cool to hear. I mean, I think if we operate from enthusiasm
Yeah.
in our life, maybe that's a natural byproduct. And my girlfriend tells me all the time. She's like, you have to be careful about what you're so excited about when you're talking to people, because like my enthusiasm can be infectious. And so I'll talk, like if I get into something like
Yeah.
baseball cards, I get so into baseball cards. Next thing you know, I've got like a few friends of mine like really into baseball card, and baseball cards are actually have become very expensive in the last few years as opposed to when we were kids. Or like I'm really excited about being on Zillow looking for a house. And next, I've got a couple friends of mine being like, "Oh, I'm thinking about buying a house now," blah blah. And it's just like she's like, you have to be careful because you just can't stop yourself from like spreading your excitement about certain things.
You're the nudger. You're like
And
that dog. You know how they come up and they want the attention? That's what you are. You're the nudger.
oh, that's funny. Well, I do want to get into the process of you even being on Alaskan Killer Bigfoot if we can.
Perfect.
And I want to go. This series is still on. All the episodes are not out yet. It turns out,
Okay.
um, on Discovery Plus. I did the free trial and I've been binging it. Although I should have Discovery Plus, I don't know why I don't. But anyway, the premise of this show is very interesting, and it's very anchored and rooted in and has a lot of historical facts and context that's going on. And when it comes to the world of the paranormal, it's a very interesting origin story of this area in Alaska, Portlock, Alaska, that has been abandoned by the people who live there because of Nantinaq. And Nantinaq is, what other people would refer to as Bigfoot. And Nantinaq is, everyone knows Nantinaq has paranormal abilities, supernatural abilities, as opposed to just being a primate, which a lot of cryptozoologists believe that Bigfoot is just a primate, which I'm totally on board with. And they actually brought someone onto the show, Ron Moorhead, who wrote a book called Quantum Bigfoot, which I read, and I've seen him speak. Talks a little bit about, like, is Bigfoot, this interdimensional being, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so it makes sense to me that they bring in a medium on this show, because it is more than they're approaching Bigfoot from the launch point of it is Bigfoot has supernatural paranormal abilities, right? And for those who, but there is one thing I want to do as well and get into, and that is and I know they're probably doing it for television, but I think people do this just because they've been raised this way, but they try to juxtapose psychics and religious people.
Hmm.
Like, if you're psychic, religious people can't trust you because that's not the work of God, right? And so they try to pit like a psychic against religion, or like you can't have both, because it's the work of the devil to be talking to
Well,
spirits.
those people that were there on the little island, we'll say, were very much like one of them in particular. I mean, I thought that they would not have cut this out, and I haven't watched the whole thing, but there was a point where I was like, I finally just turned around and I was like so irritated with him, and I was rather short, and I thought they would have kept that in the thing because it was nice and juicy,
Yeah.
but they really were not. I mean, they really, like, their faith did not allow anybody like me in it at all.
That's one of the things I did notice.
Yeah,
And it struck me as like, oh yeah, this isn't uncommon,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And how long have you been doing readings for people?
For over 10 years, but pretty much full time for over 10 years.
Yeah, and so I'm curious about how often this arises in your work, like when someone's like, you know what, I've never done this before because, I've been
Not
religious
very
and
often. I mean, that's the thing is like, I have which I'm sure you know this, like, if you're aligned with what you're doing and you love it, people come to you that are aligned with you. So, I mean, it doesn't roll into my life very often at all. So, I mean, that's why I think I was so taken back by one of them that was so blatantly rude to me from the get go. And then later on, they contacted me a few months later and said that, because I thought it was planned. I thought that that it was planned to have this antagonist, but they actually got irritated with him because since I came out there, they wanted them to treat me with respect. And this one guy was just horrible, which I don't think they really showed that on the show.
yeah, I'm not able to like be like, oh, I bet it was so and
Yeah.
so. And for for those listening, I watched the first 6 episodes. I think those are the ones that are available at the time we're recording this, and it is interesting. And the last episode specifically, things really escalated. So I mean, if people are into Bigfoot and into an interesting, backstory for sure about this village that was abandoned because of Nantinaq, killing all these people went missing and were murdered and like just brutally killed. So they said, we're done with this. Bigfoot doesn't want us living here, and they left. Um, that's a story unlike any I've heard before, and going back to try to map out the area and see if they could settle there again. It is an interesting premise, and there is um, there is stuff going on that you're just like, wait, what's going on? But it's just like any other show, and it's television, and I would be curious to know. I mean, obviously, there's a couple of the guys that are pretty religious, and so and you can kind of tell that like they're not open to the idea of you know, a medium being there. necessarily, but by the end of the episode, they're all like, "Well, how did she know this? How did she, And they admit they're like, I'm pretty skeptical about all this stuff, but there's no way she could have known that." So it seems like, against all odds, when people aren't open to something, and it's a phenomena in parapsychology as well, that if someone is open to something being possible, the results improve.
Yeah.
And, occasionally you hear the stories about people being blown away by a psychic. They're like, I don't believe in psychics. And the psychic tells them something. And then they're like, I believe in psychics all the way, 100% now. But at the same time, I do believe it's beneficial if people are there with an open mind. I
Yeah.
don't know how you feel about that when it comes to, but like you said, when you're doing something and people are coming to you, obviously they have an open mind if they're seeking you out, right?
Yeah. I mean, for the majority of, I mean, every once in a while, there'll be somebody that is pretty close, but if they're paying me for an hour with me, they they're going to listen.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I think, and you were there for just a day.
Just a day, but it was a long day. It
Yeah,
was it was cold, and it was in May, there was still a lot of snow, and there was like no, like, like if you're doing, say I'm doing a reading, I'm like, okay, that's an hour, and then I take a break and then do another one. But if you're there and you're like basically on, because I was live mic the entire time, so you are live, it's all day long, you are live, you are on, so whatever you say, they can take and put it on camera.
now, have you now you live in the Alaska
I
area?
did. I lived there for 18 years, and now I'm in Arizona, but we still have
Okay.
a place there.
Okay. So is that how they
You know, I they called around, and so they just heard people kept giving them my name, and so then they contacted me, and and I flew out there. But I had no idea. Like literally, I thought this was like a medium thing. I was picking up, like I was picking up things about two brothers, like totally different, like not like my mind was not on Bigfoot. So I was picking up all this other stuff, which I still think some stuff went down. Like I feel like there were two brothers or two twins or something, and they had a falling out, and it kind of separated the people that lived there. Like so, it had like two belief systems or two parties, and that started to be the fallout of the community. But
did
there's no
yeah.
documentation on that I know of.
Yeah, well, they really don't get into any documentation, at least so far in the series, and it's a show about Bigfoot, so I wouldn't
Yeah,
expect them to, I guess. But it makes you like when all of these people show up missing
yeah,
and people are murdered. What they don't reference, at least through the first half of the first season, is was anybody arrested? Right?
yeah,
Was there anyone in this village who was found to be a murderer?
yeah,
Or who was going around killing people? Like, what was going on between people? I mean, because you hear it a lot in like the cryptozoology world. It's like people are scarier than Bigfoot,
yeah,
and so it makes you wonder, like, were all of these people, mysteriously disappeared or killed, or were some of them actually, there was, this was what in the 1900s, early 19. I'm trying to remember. 70 years they said since it's been settled, so 1950s. So were people being killed by other people, and what was going on there?
but Alaska then I think was so different. And another thing, I don't know if I even mentioned it to them, but I saw like a blue truck, like an older blue truck. Um, and that has some relevance to what was going on, to the whole
Interesting.
mystery. Yeah. And
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know, I think I told them, but again, they were so focused on the Bigfoot portion and not the people portion.
Yeah, yeah, I could imagine. And yet it's interesting because the whole area is so idyllic. I mean, it's gorgeous and
Yeah.
beautiful terrain, which I guess is what you get when human beings leave for 70 years. Nature kind of, not that it wasn't beautiful
Yeah.
before, um, but your sense of being there. I didn't, while watching it, even though we hadn't spoken yet, I didn't get the sense that you were just like saying things for the camera either. Like, oh, well, this is the TV show. I better say that this place is,
No,
there's creepiness or there's a weird energy
no.
happening here. But there, that place does seem to encompass something, right? Or something going on
It
there.
does, but I also have to add that Alaska in itself has, you know, how different areas have different energy. Alaska in itself has some coarse energy, right? It's not like some it's like if you imagine like Arizona has pretty fine energy. It's just easier. Alaska has some very coarse energy. So maybe the lessons are a little harder, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's almost as if the energy and the terrain have a relationship with one
It
another.
totally does. Yes, absolutely. There's just more like things still turning there. Like if you imagine like the topsoil or boulder, things are still turning there. Are
Okay. Yeah. So it's almost like there's disruption, there's liminality because it's like the in
Yeah.
between, the transformational.
Yes, absolutely. It's a different, but there's a lot of people who don't, there's a certain group that are there and they love it, right? That's their happy place because they love doing backcountry skiing. They love kind of intense challenges. And that's a great, that's kind of riding that bubble, that intense time. And Alaska's great for that.
Yeah, that's yeah, I guess that makes sense. The to think when if especially if that's what, gets you, that if that's what invigorates you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that intensity and Alaska holds that for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, I'll be interested to see, what happens with that show, and if people end up going back to that area because what they revealed on the show was that it was, well, I don't want to give any spoilers in case anybody hasn't watched it, but they weren't the first people to leave that area, it turns out. So
Oh, interesting.
um so it happened multiple times before where people are like, no, I
Interesting.
don't think we need to stay here.
So interesting. I mean, you know what? One of the things, the cool things that, because again, this isn't the type of stuff like I pretty much focus on, um, helping people transform their lives. The, I like focusing on the good things. And it was really interesting because they believe that there's a portal aspect, potentially a portal aspect of how this energy is coming in. And I did see something, and when I say see, I'm seeing it with my third eye, but I did see something like coming out and retracting, like like going, like being going out and then retracting back in. I did see some type of energy like that. And I thought that was really interesting because it made me think about, I don't think about portals and stuff that often. And it really made me think, how many portals are there around here? And I even was like, okay, can we create our own portal, right? Do we want to create our own portal to God or to source or whoever, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm hyper fascinated by portals,
Yeah.
and just from experience I've had at locations that are purported to have portals, one natural, one made by a person.
Oh, interesting.
So that is that's pretty funny that you brought that up. The I happen to I have my own like working theory that is not based on any necessarily evidence or anything, that that I do believe that there are a lot of Bigfoot creatures out there and these other creatures, but I think that we might be overestimating how many of them there are, because I think they're traveling through these interdimensional portals from location to location, and they can kind of blink in and out whenever, not necessarily whenever they want, but maybe so, right? And could they be at the same place at the same time? And so I think someone who's seeing a creature in like maybe Portlock, Alaska, might be seeing the same creature down in Florida or somewhere else, right? There could be crossover there, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean I agree with you. But here's the thing that I think is interesting. So my philosophy in life pretty much is, you know, if something, when we talk about positive, negative energy, light, dark, whatever you want to call it, like the more you put focus on, something that's negative energy, the more you put focus on it, the more energy it has, the more, you have the potential to interact with it, right? And so I almost feel like at this Portlock place that the the energy, because I could definitely feel it without a doubt, 100%. I could definitely feel different pockets, but the energy of it was almost connected to humans' behavior, right? So it's not necessarily what they're calling, this thing, this creature that's coming out through the portal. I feel like the energy is more connected to human behavior, and maybe we assign it. Somebody has assigned it to this creature, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. There clearly is a lot of focusing of individuals' energy specifically about this place and about
Yeah,
Nantinaq, this creature, this Bigfoot that is there. And it's being, not held responsible, but all of this stuff is being ascribed to this idea of something, right? And which many people have said they've even seen and had encounters with, and I'm not going to tell them they haven't, but to put all of everything that happened in this place on the shoulders of this creature that people
yeah,
have seen, it might not be fair to Nantinaq or Bigfoot.
right.
Um, but what does that do when all of these people start focusing their energy? Like if the whole world started telling someone that they're evil,
Right.
does that person become evil? What chance does that person have to not be evil if everyone keeps telling them they're evil? You know, which I guess I'm not trying to have commentary on like today's culture, but that is interesting to think about. Like, okay, well, how much energy are we focusing onto this thing, and what type of energy are we focusing that we expect it to do, or we expect it to be a certain way?
Yeah, and I mean, for me, there was like one place that definitely, like when we first went to it, it didn't feel good. It had very, like I'll say, dense energy. But after we did like some prayers and did some other stuff, there was a transformation, right? And I live my life by that. I live my life with the awareness that we can transform energy and or call in, there can be a transformation in what's going on in that particular area, or with our heart or mind, or however it takes place, right? And there was a transformation. And so I think it's interesting to think, to think about, okay, well, where is this this dense energy really coming from?
Yeah. And how do we process it too when we encounter it? And is
Yeah.
that what's making people sick out there? I mean, yourself
And
included.
maybe, I mean, okay, so I could see, I could feel the certain areas, and that surprised them. But maybe the reason I felt the certain areas is because they, before I got there, they had put so much focus on those particular areas. And so that's why energetically I felt it, right? Is because they had put so much focus on it.
Yeah, so it's like, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah. I mean, definitely it felt, there was definitely some heavy energy that didn't feel good. Right. And I'm very sensitive to that stuff. I don't like going into bars because there's a lot of stuff there that doesn't feel good to me. And this place definitely held that. But which came first?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's a tough one to get into too, because there's so many, especially in the world of the paranormal, there are so many like quote unquote famous locations that have these stories attached to them. And so when you go to these places, you anticipate having
Right.
experiences, right? And I think that's where the skeptic is a very helpful person
Yeah.
in some of these situations, um, which is different than like say someone who's skeptical when you show up to this project they're working on. This we're talking about a different kind of skepticism here, and more of an anchor than a rebuttal, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it does make me wonder, like, it's tough to keep all of these things present in your mind, at the forefront of your mind, when you're, especially when you show up to it. Like, there's a place I've been going to called Post Town Elementary School. It's in Ohio, not far away from my hometown, and there's all kinds of stuff happening there, and it's really wild. And I'll be going back again in next month, but there's they have a saying there: once you leave, you believe, right? Because so much activity
Hmm.
happens at this place. And so, is all of this activity happening because everybody knows how active this place is?
Right. I mean, because I went in there thinking I would be doing mediumship stuff, I had no idea I was going to be doing anything with land, right? And that's what it ended up me focusing on land, on different areas of the land, which I had no, like, that was so far from what I had anticipated. Um, in one area, like we were walking down the beach and, it was a vast area. And they were walking down the beach and they asked me something and I said, um, that if it was almost like, because I could feel like the energy coming down. And I said, it's almost like a funnel or something. And I don't know if they had that in there, but one of the guys was like, yeah, that's the exact word. That's the word I was looking for her to use. And so there were certain things about like the land that I would have no way of knowing. I mean, there's just no way I could know going into that because my mind was so far elsewhere.
That's funny. Like, I don't remember the funnel conversation on the
Yeah,
beach, so
it might not be in there.
I am curious. I wonder if if that was by design. They wanted to like keep you in the dark. I mean, I know you don't like to know a lot about
I don't like to
your
know.
yeah.
And so I think I think it was probably I think it was probably by design on both of ours. And then when I was leaving, because I will say that the end when I left, it wasn't exactly how they portray it in the show. But when I left, they were like, well, do you want to know what's going on here? I was so tired. I was so done. I was just like, I mean, I could not even buckle the thing back in the helicopter. I was just like so done at the end of that day. I was like, I could not care a less what's going on here. Just, just take me away.
Yeah, I mean
I
they
was
had you hiking
done.
out in you were hiking in the wilderness of Alaska for a full day in the
I
cold.
was done. Yes.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's like, number
It
one
was
on most people's
cold.
list.
Yeah, it was cold and you're post holing through the snow. So I was just like, even though our son saw it and he thought it was funny because I hopped off the helicopter with my Starbucks coffee.
Oh yeah, that was I noticed I did notice that. I did notice that you had a Starbucks coffee with you.
Yeah, it didn't last.
It's like welcome to Alaska. Welcome to the wilderness. Oh, can I where can I put my latte?
Yeah,
Um,
the day did not stay on that progression.
yeah, that's well, I'm interested. Do have you had any contact? I mean, do they keep in have they kept in contact with you at all about what's going on out there?
I did. So they contacted me a few months ago to do like a voiceover. One of them, I was like, I would never say this. So I did not, one sentence I did not do. Um, and they said that they are making some progress, but it doesn't sound to me like they're fully committed on making it go. Like they're kind of, I don't know. It feels a little bit like a lack of commitment. Like, what are we going to do with this place?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, I don't anticipate that, they're at least where it stands now, it's definitely up in the air about whether or not they're going to even try to like, go back to this and actually settle it again. But um I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
it's not easy. I mean, they took me out there in a helicopter because if we had used a boat, it would have taken a very long time. And so it's just not, it's like basically you do have to make a commitment. If you are going out there, you're going to stay for a while because it's not like something, you go out there and have lunch and go home.
Yeah, it doesn't it's not like going from Tucson to Phoenix.
No, no, it's a commitment
Yeah,
for
there's
sure.
like it is, and I think a lot of people, especially in the lower 48, we might not appreciate fully what it's like to be in Alaska.
Yeah, that's
And
different.
yeah, it's like, well, we'll just get a four-wheel drive vehicle and go over.
No, you won't.
Yeah, you're not getting very far. The Well, when it comes to the most outside the box experiences you've had doing your work, is this at the top of the list?
It was, I wouldn't say it's like, I wouldn't say it's at the top of the list. It was like a long day. But recently I was in Mexico, in Laredo, Mexico, and I went up, there was a mission, and this was just me on my off time. There's a mission up in the mountains outside of Laredo, Mexico. That, I mean, you should go check that place out. That is one of the weirdest places. And it's like recognized as like, because it's one of the oldest missions established in Baja. Crazy energy, crazy energy.
How long were you there?
We just went up there for a tour, and I was like, and it's in this little town, and I was just like, get me out of here as quickly as possible.
Oh,
It
wow.
was so intense. It was crazy.
So, well, we can put a couple pieces together just from knowing that it's one of the oldest missions. So, like, that there's obviously some gnarly stuff that happened there when it came
Yeah.
to the original people who inhabited the land.
And that's exactly it. It was like 80% was wiped out, but it was also the land. It was like all that was left. It was like the land was almost barren, so to speak. And all that was left was just like the energy of trauma. It was so crazy. It wasn't like people go up there thinking this amazing spiritual experience. It does not hold that, because it doesn't. It's like this little town, and it's untouched by time. So even like the few little ranches around it are still stuck in that very traumatic and painful. It was crazy, so crazy.
Yeah, and I think the more advances that science makes, finally, or not finally, but eventually, scratching and clawing their way to try to catch up with the intuitive world and the spiritual world, and knowing some of these things intuitively, like generational trauma,
Yeah,
inherited grief, these things. It makes sense that it's not just, and anyone who's done any kind of really good meditation, and people have different ways to meditate, but one of my favorite ways to really feel grounded is to draw within the power of, draw from the power of the earth and the
yeah,
healing in the light, and then asking permission to send what no longer serves or you want out back into the earth so it can transform it.
yeah,
And when you have a bunch of people being, whether it's slaughtered, or you have all of this trauma and this grief, just it's like someone out with a water hose watering their yard, right? And they're just spraying grief into the grass, and it's
yeah. It
just
was
soaking deep in.
intense. It was so intense. And even like there's this one little restaurant, and even going in there, I mean, you would think that the guy, serving or working, or I guess it's his restaurant, you would think that he had, just had two limbs cut off before we walked in. He was so uncomfortable. And so it was just so intense, so
Well, it's
crazy.
yeah. I'll
Yeah.
have to, I'll have to get the name of that place from you, so
Yeah.
I'll make a
I'll,
trip
I'll,
down
um,
there.
send it in Instagram for sure. But I wrote a blog about it because it was just like, whoa, so crazy.
And that's
Because
on your
again,
web. Is that on your web? And that's on your website,
It
right?
should be posted on my website. It goes on, Your Tango is going to publish it, and then soulspring.org publishes it also. It's on soulspring.org also.
Okay, cool. The well, it's it's got to be interesting to just kind of be thrust into that world of going on, especially the show. I mean, the name of the show, Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, is. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty intense, pretty aggressive for a
Right.
for the name of a show. It definitely grabs your attention. I guess that's what they're going for. But there's a bunch of us in the paranormal world who have been, you know, sensing or just believing that Bigfoot is tied to a lot more than just being like a creature that's born, and then walks around physically. And I have a friend who um, I've talked to multiple times on here, and he works with a psychic, and he's also been training his own abilities. But the communication with uh, Sasquatch, Oma, Bigfoot, telepathically. and communicating. I'm curious about when it comes to your own experience, if there is, because I think, we hear a lot about when people say, "Oh, I'm talking to my spirit guides, I'm communicating with my guides, or my angels, et cetera, et cetera." And I think some people think they kind of envision, "Oh, you're like just like you and I right now." Oh, so I'm asking a very specific question. I'm getting a very specific answer in sentence structure, et cetera, et cetera. Can you define the nature of your communication?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is just like I'm talking to you, right? Sometimes it is like that. And then other times, it's very symbolic. Like, the simple thing of me, like, okay, if I were to, for me, the biggest thing for me to understand Ryan, how does he move through the world? He nudges, he's constantly bringing this expanded awareness. And so they show me this picture. And so sometimes it is like I just have these conversations, and sometimes they show me images, but I feel a lot. Like I'll feel something and it reminds me of something else. So it's a lot of symbolism that takes me, so I make it, it's like I have this, I've been doing it long enough. I have a vocabulary. So something means like I'll feel it and I'll know, oh, I know what that is. And sometimes I'll be saying something to somebody and I'll be like, oh, that doesn't feel quite right. And I back up and then I find it. Like I can tell if something isn't quite right.
Yeah. There's, there's, I'm trying to figure out how to say, it's ironic I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but the, the words we use often aren't nearly as important as the meaning and the intent behind those words, or that are
True.
infused inside those words. But then, on the other hand, certain words definitely portray the meaning and the intent a hell
Yeah.
of a lot more effective than other words do. Um, and it strikes me as kind of like remote viewing as well, when you're talking about images, seeing
Yeah.
images
Absolutely.
and things like that. And I I'm curious as far as when it comes to, have you ever, this question is totally out of left field,
Yeah.
and for some reason it just popped into my brain.
Great.
Have you ever given someone a reading, and then like while the reading is happening been like, "Oh, this person isn't, they didn't really disclose who they were to me, like, as not like
Not really,
not in
because
a
I
nefarious way, but like."
no, because it's like before I do a reading, or maybe right at the beginning, I tune into them. So, and that's the thing is I don't want to know anything about people. So there's nothing like disclosure or not disclosure, because they can say whatever, but it's like it doesn't. But again, I don't even think anybody really tries to like pull the wool over my eyes.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And so it doesn't, I mean, I could say it might happen. Here's when it would happen is like just, in the grocery store and running into somebody and they have no idea what I do. That's when it would happen, right?
Yeah.
That's when I'd be like, oh, okay.
Well, I've always, how the government has like, well, people will say they have secret space programs.
Yeah.
I've always, I've always just kind of mused, I guess, to, I don't know if I've talked about it on this show ever, but I know they have like a Department of Paranormal, right? And so I'm always curious if they are like secretly recruiting psychics.
I don't know. I mean,
Or
I think it would be so interesting to see like how, if my mind is different, like if it looks different. But here's something that I've seen that I haven't necessarily shared with anybody. I think that, well, what I've been shown, and it used to be more so than now, but it's especially on the coast, like West Coast, and you're in LA, right?
yeah,
And there's a lot near San Francisco. So there's a lot of stuff out in the ocean. I don't think it's not just military, but it's definitely government and it's definitely observation stuff. So there's a whole bunch out in the ocean that like they show it to me when I say like my guides. They show it to me almost like, oh, kind of like lights, but with a little bit more structure. There's a whole bunch in the ocean kind of monitoring things, if that makes sense.
that's interesting.
And I've seen it much more in the but it's still there. I mean, I feel like it's still there. And so it's like different layers of it. And it's off the coast.
Yeah, there's a guy, Jimmy Church, who has a show called Fade to Black, and he had a show on History Plus, or anyway, but there was some photographs and some images that they stumbled upon a couple years ago that they had taken, where they were saying that we've discovered an underground or an underwater base off
Ah,
the coast,
okay.
like towards just outside of LA, just right around
Okay.
here, and where craft are entering and leaving. And so that's like the only thing I've heard about, like I mean, other than the fact that there are a ton of sightings off the coast, especially
Well,
in
I
Santa
would,
Barbara, San Diego.
yeah, and I would also say that there's something outside of Oregon and there's something outside of San Francisco area, and then definitely LA. And I don't know what it is. It's not. I mean, I think some military knows about it or whatever, but I'm not. I have no idea what it is. It's definitely government though.
Yeah, yeah. I have a couple friends who love the ocean, and they get mad that we talk about space more than we do the ocean,
Yeah.
um, because we know more about space than we do the ocean, and um, that's always just been kind of funny to me that people get so upset about it. I'm like, well, go jump in the water, go figure it out. You know, it's like it's a lot easier for you to go swimming than it is for me to go to space. But the the mysteries of the ocean are definitely very intriguing when it comes to what's going on. But it's also one of these, to me it's like one of these like unknown terrains, right? Where some people have a fear, they won't go swimming in lakes or the ocean because they're like, I don't there's things in there, which they're not wrong. There's a bunch of fish and
Yeah.
sometimes sharks and things that could actually eat you, living in there. And so they're just terrified of that. But then on another scale, there is so much unknown in the darkness down there.
But this is more to, what's the right, it's not necessarily monitor, but it can have impact on humanity, right? It's whatever's there, whatever's been put there, because humans put it there, I
Oh, okay.
believe. And so whatever's there is kind of set in place until it's needed, I think is the best way to put it.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know what it is. I will say that we were closer to needing it a few years ago than we are
That's
right
that's
now.
an interesting phrase. We were closer to meeting it or needing it.
Needing it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, needing it. Like closer. Well, like you and I might not say that we need it, but whoever, somebody thinks that there at some point it's there available when we need it.
Okay. Gotcha.
But it will affect, have effect on humanity, on the people in that area.
That's
So
interesting. But you don't get any sense at all of when that might be happening.
no, and I feel like it was more pivotal a few years ago than it is right now. Like
Oh,
more,
okay.
like the pressure was higher a few years ago than it is right now.
Hmm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, and I'm not trying to like take this into a dark or scary place, but it kind of reminds me of the Doomsday Clock, right?
Yeah.
Um, that for nuclear war, and what's happening in society. It is interesting though that this technology and the advances that we make, we have decided somewhere along the line, the people who were able to make these decisions collectively decided that defense and offense were the most important things when it comes to, I guess, civilization, society, structure. And I'm starting to like soften my edge a little bit on certain things like organized religion because part of me understands the purpose or
Yeah.
the original intent of
Yeah.
like, okay, well, we've got all these people. How do we all agree to live in a certain way where it's not just everyone freaking out all the time and like worried about everybody else in chaos, right? Or, and so we have to have some kind of morality in place that we can all agree upon is how we should probably live our lives, right? And then that gets taken too far, obviously, and things happen like this mission you're talking about in Mexico. is the end result of that, right? But it makes sense to me that some kind of structure or some kind of organization of some kind is needed. But for some reason, we decided to go a certain direction with it, as opposed to intuitively listening to, ourselves, and whether it's connecting to source or whatever, and going that direction. Do you think we can? I feel like more and more people are trying to head back that direction, though.
Absolutely. I do absolutely 100% believe that there is a shift that is allowing us to live more intuitively and with our heart. And I also 100% believe that each of us have the ability to, if you want to call it an instant healing or whatever you want to call it, each of us have the ability in this very moment to, to be in a place of peace and compassion. And it might not be, it like me looking at my window, I might see something completely different than what I see right now. But we have that awareness, that ability to put our awareness on that peace, on living in a place of fulfillment. But something pulls us back here, for the strife or for the, something pulls us back here. But we all have that ability to put our awareness on that fulfillment.
Yeah, and I love the sound of that. And it is interesting how we get pulled. We always get drawn back. I mean, and I know I definitely go through ebbs and flows of times where I'm connected in a much deeper way than other times.
Yeah.
And I guess it's like, well, what lesson do I have to learn that brings me back and gets me back to being connected? And then I kind of drift and then have to learn a different lesson and then get connected again.
Well, and sometimes, because I often call it distraction. Sometimes the distraction is fun, right? It's a distraction from that place of, peace and compassion. But the distraction sometimes is fun, right? Maybe it's a little hedonistic or whatever. And so we come back to the distraction. And sometimes the distraction isn't so fun.
Yeah. I suppose it all depends on, what kind of judgment are we assigning to whatever the
Yeah.
distraction is, and why
Yeah.
are we deciding that it's, good or bad?
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately that's it. I mean, actually, I would say if we can judge it, if we are putting it as good or bad, it is the distraction, because otherwise you're just in that place of peace and there is no good or bad.
Yeah, that sounds pretty chill.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like how I like to move through life. And so then when I when I was invited to explore the killer Bigfoot, it was a different song and dance.
So
So
would you do that again?
yeah, I think so. I mean, it depends on who it was. Like I mean, I'm all for, like, um I love a challenge, like to see, okay, like really what can I tune into? I love that. And I have confidence in my abilities. So for that aspect, yes. But then there's this piece of integrity that I'm like, okay, it's ultimately because they can edit it and do whatever they want with it. So
Yeah.
you have to have faith in them. And I really didn't know anything going into it about who they were. So
Yeah, that is tricky. And I mean, especially when you're mic'd up all day and filmed all day, they literally can. I mean, any
they can
story,
do
any
anything.
narrative can be told, and you're right. You just have to have faith and
Yeah, I
trust
had to
that.
have faith. And
Yeah,
so I
and
don't regret doing it at all. Was it a different thing than I typically do? Absolutely. Which is why I reached out to you, because, I know that this is kind of your knowledge base.
yeah, I'm curious. Is there any other question you had about it um, that you might think that we could shed some light on here
Well,
with
I
me?
wanted to talk to you about the portals, which we talked about, and you believe in those. So what's your take on, like, do you think that there could be like an evil Bigfoot?
You know, I think I think that's a really interesting question because it's I think when people first get interested in Bigfoot, It's a very simple question. Like, is Bigfoot good or bad? But then the deeper and deeper you get into this, it becomes such a more complex question, even though on the surface it seems so simple. And I think the conversation we were having earlier about, whether we're ascribing labels and judgment to certain things and what kind of energy are we infusing into something.
Yeah.
There's, if we look at basically the assumed facts as we believe we know them now about what a Bigfoot creature is: bigger, stronger, stealthier, motives unknown, potentially, other than wanting to just live and not be disturbed by us. They could definitely, rip someone to pieces, right?
Right.
Theoretically, or hypothetically, whatever. And so the potential for evil is there in the sense of, oh, they could just they could decapitate us, they could rip us to shreds, they could eat us, do whatever they wanted. We'd have no defense against them if we didn't have like a high powered assault rifle or something.
Alaska. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that sense, could they be evil? I suppose when you frame it in that context, right? There's the potential for evil there, right? But it really depends who you talk to, because I've got friends who say they communicate telepathically with Bigfoot and Oma, and they don't do that. But then you'll also hear those same people or other people say, to try to pigeonhole all Bigfoot
Mm.
as this one type of thing is where the first mistake happens when trying to examine this. And forgetting that they are individuals, much in the same way we are individuals. I mean, there's a big difference between Martin Luther King Jr. and Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
And to try to, use, two or three adjectives to describe all human beings when you have that big of a spectrum between like their behavior and the way they go about their lives is pretty, I guess, is pretty foolish. So I would say that there are definitely, I mean, just from friends I have, especially when regarding portals,
Yeah.
there's this place in Florida has a portal that's natural, and then it has a quote unquote human made portal by someone who wasn't even aware that they made it. And creatures come out of that portal to protect them from the creatures coming out of the naturally occurring portal, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
which is pretty scary to think about, that there are creatures coming out of a portal that, have no problem harming us in some way, whether it's just psychologically or energetically, because no one has been physically harmed out there. But so, in that sense, what are those creatures that they're being told are the ones that need protection against from other creatures? I don't know that. I don't know the specifics of that. But it does leave open the door that it could be a Bigfoot.
But
Um,
maybe it's the collective energy, right? I mean, it could be if there's a portal, or maybe we create, the collective creates that. And so if you have a community that's so fear based, collectively, they are creating this portal and this energy that's coming through and terrorizing.
Yeah, and I just know from personal experience, I don't know what it was, but in regards to having some kind of encounter, the noise that had heard, that I 100% feel was directed directly at me,
Yeah.
was, it wasn't, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee sometime.
Okay.
It was definitely, you need to get the hell out of here right now,
Okay.
or you're not going to enjoy what happens.
And
And
I get that. Listen,
yeah,
I get that, but I am so much the type of person that I don't go down those roads, right? But you go back to to that little school. Like I don't go to those places.
yeah, but at the same time, the thing I've really come to understand since that experience, which has been, just under 2 years ago,
Yeah.
the physical sensation I had in my body when
Yeah.
that happened was something akin to I've never experienced before,
Yeah.
as far as fear. like a primal fear, right?
Yeah.
But what I understand now in hindsight is something that can create that kind of fear in me obviously has at least some kind of potential to be able to back it up, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Um, even if it, might it be like a quote unquote fair fight, right?
Right.
It doesn't mean that it doesn't at least have the potential possibly to kind of back that up. But it didn't do that. And if it wanted to do that, it would have done that.
Yeah.
So if something really wanted to hurt me in that situation, it was the perfect opportunity to hurt me because I was by myself. No one expected me in one location or the other because they would have just assumed I would have been still at the other location because I was in between. I was in that like liminal space between. I was traveling in between two locations. And it would have been the perfect opportunity to just wipe me out, so to speak, right? And it didn't happen.
Right.
And and I believed, at least in the moment, I most assuredly believed that it was going to happen, or it was definitely the top of the list of possibilities that could happen. So, I mean, if it really wanted to get me, it would have got me. But it
Well, do
didn't
you
get me.
do
So,
like, before you, well, do you every day like fill yourself up, when you do your meditations with light and see yourself as protected? Do you do that every day?
well, when I do that, I guess I do that. But
But not every day, but when you're going when you're going into the place of
but yeah,
danger, you do it.
yeah, and honestly, my meditation schedule as of late has been pretty lackluster, to say the least. But when I'm doing investigations,
Yeah.
I definitely try to put up, some protection
Yeah.
first, get grounded, and then when I leave, I try to discard everything and
Yeah.
make sure everything understands that there's no place for it to be traveling with me.
Yeah.
Um, no passengers, so to speak, are allowed.
Yeah.
Um, but 100% for sure on that. And on that particular thing in Florida that I had happen to me a couple years ago, it was we were there for 5 days and 5 nights. So it's like when you're just there the whole time, you kind of settle into the environment and you aren't thinking about, making sure I put my protection up
Yeah.
constantly all day long, all night long, because I'm just kind of living my, doing my
Yeah. Your
thing.
life.
Yeah, and so I definitely had my guard down 100% when that happened.
Okay.
100% when that happened, my guard was down. Um,
Because I was going to say it's interesting. Like we live next to a preserve, so I go hiking almost every day behind it, and there are in the preserve, and there's like this little valley, and it like I know that something happened there, like with Native Americans. Like there was a group that was just like massacred, and they were very peaceful, and I can tell where it happened, but it doesn't, like I felt it. I felt like the sorrow. Like one day I was shown it when I was up at this place where I meditate, but it doesn't hold that energy. Like it's been cleared of it. Like they showed it to me, but it doesn't. It's not like every time I walk on that part of the valley that I feel it, but they did show it to me one day. And so I think it's interesting that some places have been cleared and others haven't, right? Because probably most of the earth has had some crap going on.
yeah, well, 100%. I agree with that. Everywhere on Earth has had bloodshed,
Yeah.
and it's just like Johnny Come Lately. Who did it last?
Yeah.
Who was the latest perpetrator? Um, and and I know, like at certain locations, especially this place in Florida, there are constantly people going there, looking for stuff and trying to figure it out. And some of them are a lot more like in depth than others. So it seems like there's, whether we were talking about like turning the soil, like
Yeah.
in Alaska,
Yeah.
and it's very, this area of Florida is very, it's not overdeveloped at all. So
Okay.
it's just a lot of woods. And so I feel like there's maybe a little more of that. The energy there might be, slightly more coarse than, like, say, in like Tampa, the city,
Yeah.
or Tallahassee,
Yeah.
the city.
Yeah.
And
For sure.
so it is definitely a little more rugged. And so I feel like the pot's getting stirred out there a bunch,
Yeah.
especially considering that it is believed that there are two different portals on the property. Uh,
Interesting.
which make it a a high traffic area of energy and of of creatures.
Yeah.
So
Very interesting. Yeah. See, I wouldn't, I mean, I'm like, I'll go to Jerome, Utah or Jerome, Arizona is like a kind of a sweet ghost town. So going there is fun. But I think where you're talking about in Florida, I would stay clear of it.
yeah, there's a theater in Jerome. I'm trying to remember the name of it. A buddy of mine sends me a picture of it every time he's there. I think it's a haunted theater, and because they have a big tapestry of the podcast, Me and Paranormal You, hanging.
Oh, fun.
But I think they just bought it online.
Huh.
But they didn't
You
know
should
that they
go
could.
there. It is
I
a
gotta go
sweet,
there
you
because
should. It's a
yeah,
sweet town.
yeah, and it's a couple friends of mine have started doing like a comedy show there, like every so often.
Yeah, you should definitely go there. It's worth the drive for sure for you. I mean, maybe it's like 7 or 8 hours for you from LA or something.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm crisscrossing across the country so often that
Oh,
it
you
makes
just
sense for
go
me to
through.
just stop through.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun.
Well, thank you. But I have a question about
Okay.
because I had heard you and I listened to very few podcasts, but I had heard you on Psychic Teachers talking about your crystal app. And so I was like,
Oh
really
yeah.
intrigued. So that was a while ago. I was really intrigued. It wasn't out yet. So I have some questions because I want to be able to turn other people onto it.
Okay.
So it can identify crystals, right?
Yeah. Currently, we can identify right around 100 crystals,
Okay, and
and
then it also
yeah,
has tips like
yeah,
caring
crystal
for
tips
Chris.
from
Yep.
actually from the psychic teachers.
Oh, cool. Okay, and
Yeah.
then you also have some tips on helping purchase. You have astrology, and then you have ethically ranked stores, right?
Well, we are. That's something we're working on. Um, as of right now, there's no standard in the industry,
Yeah,
and there are, and it's very difficult to get answers from people. We had a couple different sellers of crystal that initially we thought were going to be partners with us, and then the closer we got to release, the less information we had from them, and then the less interest we had from them to be a part of it for whatever reason. I'm
yeah,
not saying because they didn't want to put up the information to prove that they're ethically sourced or not. That's not what I'm saying, but the it just seems difficult to, and it's difficult for crystal shops to really be able to be on top of it in a way that the community is going to be expecting soon enough.
yeah,
And because, one mine doesn't provide every crystal that crystal lovers want.
right.
Maybe one or two, three, maybe, right? So you have to go to all these different sources to get your crystals and from all over the world. And if they are outside of the United States, where you know that there are certain mining standards and regulations put in place to ensure the safety of the workers and make sure there's not kids working in the mine, making sure the Taliban isn't controlling the lapis lazuli, which now in Afghanistan, all of the mines are controlled by the Taliban. Um, it's, but back before the Taliban took over control of Afghanistan, it was always, you just, from one week to the next, you never knew who was controlling a mine or not over there. But they're I think it's lapis lazuli, one of the biggest producers of lapis lazuli in the world. It comes from Afghanistan. So now it's kind of like maybe you just need to avoid lapis lazuli altogether,
Yeah.
right? And not to mention all these other things about, like, are they stripping the community of all their local resources, and then are they cutting and running, right? Leaving the environment worse off than they were before? Are they taking advantage of the community that lives there, stripping them of all their resources, only cutting them a very small portion of it, and then leaving behind a decimated environment? So there's all kinds of huge questions, and there are very few answers when it comes to crystals. I've had conversations with IRMA, which is the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. They deal with large scale mines. We're talking about like mines that provide all the steel for the world's largest, skyscrapers and things like that. And so they're not really focused on the crystal community at all. But through our conversations, I let them know, well, crystals have become $1 billion industry
Yeah.
in the last 5-10 years. And quartz is the world's most abundant natural resource when it comes to mining, as far as minerals go. And quartz is used in computers, cell phones, everything. And so then once they realize, like, oh, quartz is something that is a natural resource that is mined, on a huge level for manufacturing purposes. And it's also the most abundant crystal in the crystal world. Oh, we do need to have this conversation further down the road. So we've opened conversations with Irma. I've talked to Fairmind, which is all about artisanal mining. They are focused on gold.
Mm.
There's if you buy gold, you want to look for the Fairmind, MIND, MINED stamp of approval. That means it's past the protocols and the standards for being, ethically sourced, and sustainability is a big focus as well. And at some point they also want to be venturing into, expanding their protocols and their system into the world of crystals as well. So we've tried to open that conversation with these people, and the people who have already done all the heavy lifting, they've already done all the hard work. All we have to do is adopt their principles, their standards, their protocols, and you've got the system already made, already in place. Now it is a burden on the business because now there's responsibility involved, right? So it's not an easy sell, and we're just 4 guys. It's just me and my 3 cousins who live in Cincinnati who made this app. And we're like, well, how it'd be great to like try to raise awareness for ethical sourcing, get them in the door with like, the identification idea, and then kind of maybe, hopefully, even if it's by accident, make them realize, oh, there's some ethical sourcing things, So, that's an area that we really have to expand inside the app currently. And we're trying to have conversations with people who sell crystals to try to be able to push those people to the top of the mind for people who want to purchase crystals. How are you going to buy a crystal for healing if it's sourced from harm?
Absolutely.
Seems pretty contradictory. So we want to really showcase and push out the people who are going the extra steps and trying to provide ethical sourced crystals for people. We're trying to get crystal lovers, we're trying to give them options to feel good about feeling good.
Yeah. And right, because you think about Sedona and all the, crystals on keychains or, whatever, where did the crystal come from?
Yeah, and that's a big conversation too. Well, what am I supposed to do with all the crystals I've already bought?
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing you can do to change the past.
Yeah.
So are you going to sit around? I mean, I've got so many crystals over here. I know where very few of them actually came from.
Right.
Over the years of purchasing them. Because one of my favorite things to do when I'm on the road doing stand-up is whatever city I'm in, I go find the crystal shops. I go find the rock shops, and I go hang out and look at the books, look at the tarot decks, look at the crystals, maybe pick up something. And when you ask someone at the shop, unless it's the owner of the shop, hey, do you know where these crystals came from? Oh, trusted sources. We've got trusted sources. Is usually the answer you get. And it's like, okay, can we get a little more specific than that? And then now you're a problem. Now you're antagonizing inside the shop, right? So people need to feel comfortable being able to ask those questions when they're
reach out to the person I gave you, because she knows the family that does where she gets all of her crystals. She did English as a second language. She taught the family like in the US, and they go back and forth. So she has, I think, a limited selection because it's all what's in Brazil, but everything she has, she knows where it comes from.
Yeah, and I think that's whether it's a hard pill to swallow or not for people who love crystals, it's just what they're going to have to accept moving forward is you're not going to be able to get every crystal you want.
Well, you get it from different, from the smaller places.
Yeah, and like what I mean by that is like, you're not going to be able to just go in and get every single crystal you want all the time and not have to ask it, and feel fine about it necessarily. Yeah. Like it has to things have to change a little bit, and in the way, and I think a lot of people have become more thoughtful about this, and whether it's like trying to find, sustainable Palo Santo wood, and or
Absolutely.
all these other things. So like people are making the change, and we're just trying to help push that along. I guess nudge. We're helping.
You're
We're hoping to
nudging.
nudge. We're hoping to nudge.
Yes. Well, here's an interesting thing. What about, and this is like a completely next show, but the ethics of the portal energy, right? The ethics of going to these places that have portals, or how you work in these areas that have certain energy. What are the ethics of that? How do you move through that? Which is an interesting thing, because there's obviously something there.
Yeah, that's it's not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, well, I just thought of it while we were talking, but there is something to it, right? Because there's something greater than us that's involved in the portals, right?
Yeah, I mean,
And
you just think you can just go wherever you want, whenever you want, and do whatever you want when you're there.
yeah, maybe there's something there for, right? It's true, but maybe there's something,
Yeah.
maybe there's a reason for pause and think about the ethics of that.
Yeah, and I mean, because I think on one hand you have like exploration at any cost, right? Which
Yeah,
has been kind of the motto of human beings since the
yeah,
beginning. Um, and then on the other hand, it's like, well, what about the people that are already there?
yeah. I mean, I think that that's the interesting thing, because we are merging onto this, this greater understanding of the universe, or going into, into this new territory. And so maybe even for that, we need to have some ethics in place.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to be one who says I don't think ethics are necessary.
Yeah. Well, it's just an interesting
But
concept
yeah,
because,
no, it is. It really is, though, and it's. I think anyone who's thoughtful about um, being an investigator and trying to understand phenomena, I think they kind of bring a set of ethics, hopefully, with them to the.
yeah,
I'm not going to sit here and answer this question before like really trying to examine everything I've done as far as like all the different investigations and things, and just act like, oh, I've never been unethical in the way I've
right.
investigated some property, because I don't know the answer to that right now. But I think if you're bringing like a set of like, okay, I'm curious, I'm respectful, and I'm not here to try to harness the energy for my own benefit,
Yeah,
or exploit it in a way, I
yeah,
guess. And that gets into the whole, well, isn't all television exploitation? I don't know about that. So because I think there is actually true documentation of things, and but yeah, oof, that's a very interesting question.
yeah. It's good for another show.
Yeah,
So,
for sure, for sure.
I just wanted to say, for my listeners who might not be familiar with your app, that it's Crystal Eyes, like EYES,
Yeah,
not the
all yeah.
crystal eyes. Like there is an app that's Crystal Eyes, like you crystallize something, but yours is crystal, and the oh geez, EYES, Crystal
Yeah,
Eye.
yeah, it's all one word, crystal eyes. I mean,
Yeah.
the play on that is like you want to be able to see what your crystal is, so you take a photo of it, and currently we can identify I think 98 crystals. There's a
Okay.
list of the crystals inside the app that we can identify. I know it's kind of like, well, if I don't know what the crystal is, how am I supposed to know that it's on the list? Well, we're working on that. We should have another 200 crystals that it can identify sometime early this year. We're hoping as soon as we can get that trained. It takes time and money to like do all that, but so we're currently working on that as we speak. The psychic teachers, Deb and Samantha, have provided content. My buddy Karen Rontowski and some other people are also providing. We're in talks with. I've got a couple different geologists that are providing information about, minerals and crystals, and also ethical sourcing information. And we have like links to resources like Irma and Fairmind inside the app. We also are building out something that I really love, and it's like a metaphysical yellow pages, like a
Oh,
directory
cool.
of, shops, healers, psychics, and eventually it will have like metaphysical, like woo spot, like hot spots too, whether it's like
Oh, that's
base.
awesome.
Yeah. Um, so we're building out that directory as well. We got to add you to that directory
Oh,
in our
thank you.
next update. But so we're excited, and we also have some other plans that we are really excited about for the app, as far as like gamification goes. So um, yeah, we got some big plans for it coming up for this year, and yeah, we and it's a work in progress. We're a small business that's doing our best to try to you know nudge nudge
Nudge,
the
nudge.
crystal
But I love
community.
what you're doing. I love the idea behind it. Absolutely. And it's the direction that you are nudging us in that right direction. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like for the record, we're not experts about ethical sourcing. We're not trying to position ourselves as like the Better Business Bureau, at least not at this point, right?
Yeah.
Um, but we do think it's important to be asking these questions and being thoughtful about where the crystals are coming from, and not feel scared to ask these questions. Like, you wouldn't be scared to ask your butcher where a piece of meat came from in your local grocery store, if you're like a meat eater who goes there and buys meat there. You wouldn't be afraid to ask these questions in other areas. And for some reason, there is not all crystal shops, but some of them do have a little bit of a holier than thou kind of vibe happening, where you know where it's almost like, don't how dare you ask me such a
Yeah.
question about my precious gems and my crystals. Okay, so we need to move past that shit.
Well, and not just, I mean, with crystals, absolutely, but it's like with the whole spirituality thing, right? Is to be okay to say I don't know, or to be right that there really is. It's like to bring light to all of this. So I love that you're bringing, so it's not just crystals. You're talking about different, not providers, but whatever you want to call them.
Distributors, yeah, retailers.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that.
And it's interesting. Like, we don't expect like every crystal shop to shut down and stop
Right.
selling. And we don't want to put crystal shops out of business, because they're great places in communities to go get stones, to get tarot decks, to get books
Yeah.
on spirituality. They're great places. A lot of readers work out of the back of crystal
And to
shops.
meet
Yeah,
people, right? It's a great source.
exactly. And Irma does a really great thing. And what they do is, when they have a mine somewhere around the world, and they include everybody in the supply chain as well. I mean, they have the local indigenous community involved. They have like the distributor, the manufacturer, the miners, the union workers. Nothing gets passed through Irma if it doesn't have the votes of all five different sectors of like the total supply chain of
Mm.
the thing, right? So you have to have like the company like Microsoft, who's selling computers with like, or whatever. And you also have to have the indigenous community where the mine is, who's being affected by the mining. You have to have them all on the same page for anything to get passed through for their protocols, which is a beautiful thing about
Yeah.
it. What they do is, when a mine says, you know what, we want to go through the steps, they're not expected to shut down the mine until they can be Irma approved, right? They are like, they apply to the program. They say, we want to do this. We want to work towards that. And so Irma puts them on their website. Hey, this is another mine, another company that is trying to make a change, and that are working towards, because there is nothing bigger in this world than the mining industry when it comes to the
Mm.
future of our planet.
Yeah.
Everything around us has been mined from the earth in some way, whether it's above ground or below ground, right?
Yeah.
And so, whether it's harvested or mined, mining is the number one industry that affects, whether it's climate change, sustainability, the future of human beings on the planet Earth. Mining is the biggest thing. And, you know, that is really what this app has done for me, is like really awakened me to that. Like, oh, there's nothing more important than understanding and fixing the way we mine resources when it comes to the future of the health of this planet.
Yeah.
Um, so at least for our sake, the planet's going to be fine, but for our sake in living here. So that's what we want to that's what our vision is. We're hoping that, we get into this mode where in the next couple of years now we have, a bunch of different distributors and a bunch of different, crystal shops that are, showing that, hey, showing people that, hey, we focus on this. We're working towards this. We're doing our best to do this. We will have conversations. We admit when we don't know something, and we're trying to figure out what the answers to those questions are.
I love it. It's impactful and it's what we need. It's a perfect time for this to happen.
Yeah, I agreed. And, and it's free, and there's no ads. There's no pop-up ads. There's no free trial. You can subscribe on a monthly or yearly basis, and you get unlimited personal collection and unlimited snaps. But everything else in the app is free. You just can't have an unlimited collection size or unlimited photos. But we're doing our damnedest to try to make sure we don't have pop-up ads showing up. I'd like to think we're pretty affordable. $3.99 a month or $19.99 for the year or so.
No, I'm definitely going to send people your way for sure.
Well, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Well, again, thank you so much for this opportunity, because you were my go-to person to talk to about the whole Bigfoot thing, because it was such a crazy experience.
Well, I appreciate you chatting with me about it. And as a reminder, it's Killer Alaskan Bigfoot's the name of the show. It's on Discovery Plus. The website is polywirum.com. That's WIRUM. You can check out all the resources there, like if you want to schedule a reading or and there's also links to the podcast and all that good stuff. It's a good portal.
That's awesome. Well, awesome. Okay, well, if you ever buzz through Arizona, let me know.
Yeah, for sure. I'm coming through there all the time, so I'll definitely let you know.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, take care. Bye.